Father, we thank you for a new day. Thank you for watching over us and keeping us during the evening and the night. Lord, today I ask that you will clear our minds of anything that will separate us from you, that you will keep us fresh. May we learn today what Brother Jeff has for us to understand, and may we take it and understand it even better for ourselves. And Lord, I ask that you be with those who are not here. Guide and direct each one of them. In Jesus' name, amen.
Couple things that I want to put in place in our study of Daniel 11. It's kind of a hard study in terms of going through the application of Daniel 11 and then the prophetic application of how it's illustrating what's taking place on planet Earth, and then dissecting out of it the significance of Paneum, the Omega apostasy, and the strong delusion at the end of the world is another line that's in there. And then there's the third, if you're just dealing with the strong delusion and the Omega apostasy as just a subject in general, that's a secondary thing. The external things that are being illustrated by Daniel 11 is one, what Paneum represents in terms of the strong delusion is another. But then the third is getting into the nitty-gritty of if and what false teachings have come into this message. Okay, so there's at least three things to be addressed in all of this. So I'm pretty sure we have a clear understanding of verses 1, not a clear, but we have an understanding of verses 1 through 39. So I want to walk through that, put it in the record here this morning, and we don't have to take a lot of time on that. We can if we have to. So let's read 2 verses each and try to put it in place. And if any of you have your notes, any of the notes that I've handed out over the previous period of time that have the 6 battles of Syria, the 6 Syrian wars in it, I happen to have a set of notes up here on that. And 2 times ago when I said anything about the Syrian war, I had the wars a little bit messed up, and where I was applying them. But I thought I got them straightened out before I went to Virginia. And in Virginia, I still had them messed up a little bit. So I'd like to lock them in, make sure that, because I've said it more than one way, that we're all on the same page about that when we go through 2 also. So if Brother Graham would begin verse 1 and 2.
Also I, in the first year of Darius the Mede, even I stood to confirm and strengthen him. And now will I show thee the truth. Behold, there shall stand up yet 3 kings in Persia, and the 4th shall be far richer than they all. And by his strength, through his riches, he shall stir up all against the realm of Grecia. And a mighty king shall stand.
You're going to verse 3 there. So here's what I'm saying. There's in every verse there's going to be more than one thing that's taught. So I'm not trying to get every little detail, but in verse 1, the main thing we've done here over the past couple years, we're marking this as the time of the end. Okay, 1989 time of the end. We need to figure out, if we're studying this, if we believe that's true. And then verse 2 is what? What do we understand from verse 2? The last 4 presidents, right? Okay, who's going to read the next 2 verses?
And a mighty king shall stand up, that shall rule with great dominion, and do according to his will. And when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken, and shall be divided toward the 4 winds of heaven, and not to his posterity, nor according to his dominion which he ruled. For his kingdom shall be plucked up, even for others besides those.
What's verses 3 and 4? I think we can put those together, right? How about the expression parallel kingdoms? This is where the seventh kingdom is coming into play, coming up, and the sixth kingdom's going down. You got a better way to express it?
Fall of the United States.
Fall of the United States, rise of the United Nations, transition. What do we want to settle on?
Parallel kingdom.
Parallel kingdoms, if you understand it right, makes sense, but sixth kingdom going down, seventh kingdom coming up. I'm going to put parallel kingdoms. Okay. Verses 5 through verse 5 and 6.
The king of the south shall be strong, and one of his princes, and he shall be strong above him, and have dominion. His dominion shall be a great dominion. And in the end of years they shall join themselves together. For the king's daughter of the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement. But she shall not retain the power of the arm, neither shall he stand, nor his arm. But she shall be given up, and they that brought her, and he that begat her, and he that strengthened her in these times.
Go ahead and read all the way to verse 9, because I think we have to put verses 6 through 9 in one thought.
But out of a branch of her roots shall one stand up in his estate, which shall come with an army, and shall enter into the fortress of the king of the north, and shall deal against them, and shall prevail. And shall also carry captives into Egypt their gods, with their princes, and with their precious vessels of silver and of gold, and he shall continue more years than the king of the north. So the king of the south shall come into his kingdom, and shall return into his own land.
What's verse 5?
That's the conquering of the three parts.
Yeah, the east, the west, and the north. He becomes the king of the north with that third obstacle being overcome. We're saying that typifies 538, the beginning of the parallel history that's going to be represented in Daniel 11, 40 to 45. So what would we call that? Third obstacle?
King of the north established.
King of the north established. King of north established. Third obstacle. And what about verses 6 through 9? Okay, but what's the whole history? It's not just the peace treaty, right?
The king of the south comes and takes over the king of the north, or defeats the king of the north.
The king of the south shall push, and him shall
Yeah, shall push. How about Daniel 11:40a?
Yeah.
It doesn't really address the peace treaty, but if we do Daniel 11:48, typically we know what that means. Daniel 11:40a. Someone tell me what it means, Daniel 11:48. What does that mean? So everyone else knows, we may all know, but if I say Daniel 11:40a, what does that mean?
Deadly wound history.
The first part of verse 40, it's 1798. The king of the south is pushed against the king of the north. Okay, so, but in here we also have the peace treaty in this history, right? So we'll put peace treaty in there as well. Okay, brother Nathan, I think all you have to do is verse 10 as a singular thought.
But his sons shall be stirred up, and shall assemble a multitude of great forces, and one shall certainly come, and overflow, and pass through. Then shall he return and be stirred up, even to his fortress.
Okay, so what's that? It could be Daniel 11:40b. 40b, but what about 1989? Okay, Sister Tamina, verses 11 and 12.
And the king of the south shall be moved with choler, and shall come forth and fight with him, even with the king of the north. And he shall set forth a great multitude, but the multitude shall be given into his hand. And when he hath taken away the multitude, his heart shall be lifted up, and he shall cast down many 10,000, but he shall not be strengthened by it.
What's that? How do we summarize that thought?
It reminds me of Daniel
Pardon me?
verse 44.
Midnight. Okay, the midnight's there. But what'd you say, Tamina?
It reminds me of Daniel 11 verse 44. You know, he goes forth with the authority to utterly destroy many. That's the king of the south here. And
Yeah, the choler, the anger of it all. But I think we got to put Raphia there also. Sister Antonia, do verses 13 through 15, but verse 14 is kind of a anomaly there, but we'll put verses 13 through 15.
For the king of the north shall return, and shall set forth a multitude greater than the former, and shall certainly come after certain years with a great army and with much riches. And in those times there shall many stand up against the king of the south. Also the robbers of thy people shall exalt themselves to establish the vision, but they shall fall. So the king of the north shall come and cast up a mount, and take the most fenced cities, and the arms of the south shall not withstand, neither his chosen people, neither shall there be any strength to withstand.
How do we, I've already got a couple things up there, Midnight Cry and Paneum. Is there something else that we need to put in there?
Establishing of the vision.
Okay, that's what I said. Verse 14 is kind of an anomaly. You're going to have to take verse 14 and deal with it. It's in this verse, and it comes in those times, but it needs to be addressed in connection with verses 16 through 19, I think. So I'm going to skip that, even though you want to, and go to verse 16 through 19. Brother Vadim, you want to read that? We don't ask Jack to read.
But he that cometh against him shall do according to his own will, and none shall stand before him, and he shall stand in the glorious land, which by his hand shall be consumed. He shall also set his face to enter with the strength of his whole kingdom, and appoint ones with him. Thus shall he do. And he shall give him the daughter of Uman, corrupting her, but she shall not stand on his side, neither be for him. After this shall he turn his face unto the isle, and shall take many, but a prince for his own behalf shall cause the reproach offered by him to cease. Without his own reproach he shall cause it to turn upon him. Then he shall turn his face toward the fort of his own land, but he shall stumble and fall and not be found.
So, what is that? What are those verses?
Verse 16 is verse 41.
Is verse 16 verse 41? It's verse 40? We have a disagreement going here. So you're saying verse 40, she's saying verse 41. I think it's verse 40 through 42, these verses. Because he that comes against, the verse part of it, but he that cometh against him shall do according to his own will. That's something that happens before he conquers the glorious land in that same verse. Who's coming against who in that verse? But he that cometh against him. Who's him? No, in history, who was it? It's Pompey, and what's the first thing that he does in verse 16? No, that's the second thing, isn't it? I guess this is worth considering.
Take away Syria.
Yeah, the previous. What's going on in verse 15? So the king of the north shall come and cast up a mount, and take the most fenced cities, and the arms of the south shall not withstand, neither his chosen people, neither have any strength to withstand. What's happening there? Who are the players there? Pagan Rome conquers the first division of Grecia. So, and so in the next phrase in verse 16 it says, but he that cometh against him. Who's coming against who?
Pompey against the king of the north.
The former king of the north. Okay, that's what I'm getting at. This is is that the conquering of the Macedonian horn and Antiochus Epiphanes in 168? Okay, so all I'm getting at is that first phrase of verse 16 has got to be a carry-on of verse 15. It's talking about this first step for Rome taking control of the world. What's the second step? Pompey standing in the glorious land. And what's the third step? It goes to Egypt. So you got the threefold conquering that puts Rome on the throne of the earth. How do we summarize that? Okay. All right. It's kind of a parallel to this. The three obstacles. Three obstacles for pagan Rome. All right. Verse 20 and 20. Go to 20 to 23, who's ever next.
Then shall stand up in his estate a raiser of taxes in the glory of kingdom, but within few days he shall be destroyed, neither in anger nor battle. And in his estate shall stand up a vile person, to whom they shall not give the honor of the kingdom, but he shall come in peaceably and obtain the kingdom by flatteries.
Okay, one thing that I found interesting when you go, and I mean, it really seems to, for me, it's not a big deal, but it kind of shines some light on Trump. When you go into the history that was fulfilled by Tiberius, where it says, verse 21, shall stand up a vile person, then the historians speak about how vile Tiberius was, okay? But if you get into the Hebrew, this word vile doesn't mean vile. I guess it does at one level. But it means despised. It's different. You know, if you are actually vile, then you're actually vile. But if you're just simply who you are and people despise you for some other reason, then it doesn't necessarily mean that you're vile. And I don't know Donald Trump. I haven't met him, okay? But I can see people despise him, and and another half of the country is sympathetic with his decision making. So this word vile seems to, as defined in the Hebrew, despise, it seems to fit more than just absolutely defining his character. But these verses here, how would we summarize them? It can't really call it the four presidents, it's part of it. But Pompey is already in the previous verses. If you're going to get a second witness to the four presidents, then you got to go from verse 16 to 23. This is just these two verses, so
You have book 20, 23, but we read only until 21.
thank you. I was quoting it too. So, what, any way to summarize that you guys know of? This could be the last president, I guess, and his predecessor, but could be, it could be,
Taxes.
could be what, taxes?
Yeah.
How about, because we have to, I intend to address this thought at some point in time about the arguments that are going on in this message. So I'm going to put it here, this way. South and north. Anyone know what I mean?
Yeah, why are you putting that there? Because it's only talking about the king of the north in there.
Oh, really? Isn't the raiser of taxes different than the vile person?
Yeah, but don't they rule both about
But they are
pagan Rome? Isn't that king of the north?
You're saying Republican Democratic.
Republicanism and democratic. By the way, Brother William, you told me something yesterday, and I'd heard it previously from Tanya, and I'm hoping that it's true. But I began looking for it yesterday briefly, and I can't find it, and it's this. I've heard on 2 witnesses now that the political party in the United States that leads up to the formation of the Democratic Party is this political party in the United States that's an extension of the Jacobean movement in the French Revolution, and that there was a political party that was the predecessor of the Democratic Party that had some kind of name that identified it as, a communist type influence party. And I know we've all heard this in this classroom, and we don't need it to uphold what we're saying about anything, but I looked and I can't find it. It seemed the places I was looking at the political parties in the United States, I'm not finding any commentary that there was actually some kind of Jacobean party that transcended into the Democratic Party. And you said that. Did you actually read that, or did you just pick that up from this classroom environment and make that assumption? You've read it. Okay, so I want to have that piece of information if you can find it. Okay, what I'm saying here is that if you define the Democratic Party as the king of the South and the Republican Party as the king of the North, then you can see the last Democratic president and the last Republican president in these 2 verses. And I'm only putting that, the reason I'm putting that there is not because I'm trying to make that point, but I'm seeing that this is one of the issues that we're going to have to choose between in this message. It's a subject that there's going to be, you can already see there's two positions being taken on this subject, and either they're both wrong or one of them's wrong and the other's right, but they both can't be right. So when you take these 2 verses and you're only taking 2 presidents, those 2 Roman emperors, then you can use them as a symbol for that. But I'm not denying that you've got a Pompey and Julius Caesar in these earlier verses, so you also have a witness to the last 4 presidents. But just taking those alone, marking this as something that we need to work through.
I don't understand when you say they cannot be both right.
Well, we're going to discuss that. I can see that the king of the North and the king of the South are you can see that struggle in the United States. And I know that there's people that are putting all of their focus on describing this internal struggle in the United States. But, okay, let me give you an example of where I see a problem with that. Is if you're going to identify the king of the South as communism, then where you're going to go probably, the easiest way for me to go is to French Revolution, or to France. Okay, you got two horns. You've got Egypt and Sodom. Okay, and in Isaiah chapter 1, verse 9 and 10 and 11, let's go there. So, and I'm not going to take a lot of time there, but I will give you the logic of this. I'm assuming that we know that in Revelation 11, verse 8, France is described as a two-horned power represented by Egypt and Sodom. Okay? So, in verse 9, let's start in verse 8 of Isaiah 8. And the daughters of Zion is left as a cottage in the vineyard, and as a lodge in the garden of cucumbers, as a besieged city. So he's talking about his church, God's church. Except the Lord of hosts had left us a very small remnant, we should have been as Sodom, and we should have been like unto Gomorrah. Hear the word of the Lord, ye rulers of Sodom. Give ear unto the law of our God, ye people of Gomorrah. So here God's church is being identified as Sodom. Okay, then go ahead.
What chapter are you in?
I'm in Isaiah 1. Isaiah 1. And I read verses 8, 9, and 10. So if you go to Ezekiel 29, verses 2 and 3, you will find Egypt defined as the dragon. Okay? So with France, you have two horns. One is Egypt. One is Sodom. And I'm saying that based upon Isaiah 1, 8 through 10, Sodom is a church, can be symbolize a church, and based upon Ezekiel 29, 2 and 3, Egypt is the dragon. And in connection with the dragon in Revelation 13, 11, the United States is going to speak as a dragon. And Sister White says the speaking of a nation is the action of its legislative and judicial authorities. So when you speak as a dragon, you're exercising legislative authority. So this here is a state. Egypt is a symbol of statecraft. Sodom is a symbol of churchcraft. The speaking comes from the government, and it speaks as a dragon. One of the horns of France is Egypt. This is the civil power. One of the horns of France is Sodom. This is the church power. Everyone follow that logic? So with the United States, who has been typified by France, you have republicanism, plainly told us, and Protestantism. Okay, so the republicanism, if we are going to relate to it, is this way, is the state. We don't have any choice but to it. This is the church, and it's all about church state in the United States. When we define Protestantism in the United States, what happened to Protestantism on April 19th, 1844? They passed by, they rejected the light of the first angel's message. What did the Millerites call them at that point in time? The daughters of Babylon. So who is Babylon? Rome. Pardon me?
The mother plus the daughter.
Okay, but who is it? It's the king of the north. Isn't it? Okay, so over here with state power and Egypt is atheism, and atheism is communism. What's this? King of the South. So that's a basic logic for seeing this internal struggle in the United States and saying that it is also a struggle between the king of the north and the king of the south. Okay, but this is taking place in the United States, And we're approaching Daniel 11 as what's taking place in the world. Okay, but we know that there is an image of the beast test in the United States, and then that image of the beast test goes to the world. So we know that what's going on in the world has been typified on what's going on in the United States. So you have a logic to analyze what's going on in the United States and say that this is typifying what's going to go on in the world. And I'm arguing that what we're studying here in Daniel 11 is the worldview. In fact, I'm arguing it has to be, because it's the seventh seal, is my argument. And therefore, when it is opened up, it's got to bring to perfection the original message of Daniel 11:40 to 45. And there's no way that anyone can claim that the original message that was brought to light after 1989 concerning the last 6 verses of Daniel 11 was light about an internal struggle in the United States. It was light about how the king of the north was going to conquer the world. Therefore, when that message is brought to perfection, the first and primary application would have to be in agreement with that. So here's why I think this is a problem now, okay? And maybe you can follow this logic. I'm going to put this logic in place and move away from it, because I don't want to deal with this right now. What we just read in verses 16 through 19, and also what we're marking in verse 5. What's the parallel connection between verse 5 and verse 16 through 19? In order for the king of the north to be established, he has to conquer 3 obstacles. Okay, so when you take that piece of information into the United States, in order for the king of the north to take control of all of the United States, it has to conquer 3 obstacles. Okay, and the story for the United States is the image of the beast. And what's the definition of the image of the beast? It's the combination of church and state, with the church in control of the relationship. So the church is the king of the north, and when it finally fully develops the image of the beast, it will have conquered the king of the south. Why do I say that? Because the definition of the image of the beast is when apostate Protestantism has the ability to control the state. That is the image of the beast test, isn't it? Okay, so at one level, the image of the beast test is the story of how apostate Protestantism takes control of the government of the United States. But if we're going to portray this internal struggle in the United States as a struggle between the king of the south and the king of the north, then you have to include that the king of the north has to conquer 3 obstacles. So what is the target for the king of the north? I just said it. What is the target? What are they trying to conquer? The state, the government, okay? And in the United States, how many elements of the government are there? 3, okay? That's the 3 obstacles. So what are the 3 obstacles? The legislative, judicial, and the executive. Okay, so in order for the king of the north to take control of the government, and therefore the image of the beast to be put in place, the image of the beast, we've understood correctly, it progressively develops, and then it reaches a point where it can speak as a dragon and pass the Sunday law, and the image of the beast is fully developed, right? So in order for that to happen, the king of the north, over here, apostate Protestantism, has to conquer these 3 entities, and when these 3 entities are conquered, it has control of the government. And when it has control of the government, then all that's left to do is for it to speak, the mark of the beast. Now it's no longer the image of the beast test, it's the mark of the beast test. Everyone with me on that logic? So here's the problem that I'm raising, is that if you're going to take what we're studying in Daniel 11 here and say that this is, you might say, well, this is the external, the worldview, that this is a war between Russia and the United States. Russia first wins, then the United States wins. But that it's also got to be applied internally in the United States in this struggle between the king of the south and the king of the north of these two horns. The problem becomes how we understand what Brother Graham said. This is midnight. The Battle of Raphia is midnight. And why is that a problem? It's a problem because we understand that at midnight, probation closes. Now we got some variables. We used to have a cut and dried position that at midnight the door closes. Now we have a variable that says that midnight isn't simply a point in time, it's a period of time, and in this period of time is the close of probation. Okay, so you need to settle on those two options. But if we're to understand, and I think this is correct at one level, if we're to understand that the apostate Protestantism needs to conquer these three elements in order to become established as the king of the north and have the ability to control the government in order to speak as a dragon and pass the Sunday law, I would argue they've already done that. They did that on January 20th, 2017. Even the political, commentators in the United States, they're all admitting the Democratic Party is over. If you go another 100 years in history, which you're not going to do, they didn't just lose the presidency, the House of Representatives, the Senate, and now Trump's going to stack the Supreme Court on that side of the issue. They didn't just lose that, but they lost governorships in the states, they lost state houses in the states, and the reality of it is the people that commentate on why they lost, the positions that they held that prevented the voters from voting them into office, they're not backing away from those positions. They're getting more aggressive about those positions, which tells you that they're going to lose again in the next election. They're going to go even further down. They're all over. If time would last, we're watching the end of a political party in the United States. If time would last, you'd have to see like the Green Party or what's the other one that's the Libertarian Party. Some of these other parties would have to fill that position, that void. So what I'm saying is they've already conquered this. They've already conquered their third step. They're the king of the north. All that is left to do is for them to speak as a dragon. And how we've understood it in the past is that at the midnight cry, the image of the beast test begins and it reaches its climax at the Sunday law. If my contention is true, that they've already conquered these three things, then they're ready right here now to pass that initial Sunday law. You follow my logic? They already have it. Therefore, we're already on this side of midnight. Our probation's already closed. If we believe our probation closes at midnight, as priests. So, this subject here about the king of the south and the king of the north becomes an issue to work through in terms of the different teachings that are going on right now in this movement. All right, so that's why I'm symbolizing that way. And I'll give you another argument about why I'm saying that. And it's not an argument that I fully understand, but I don't have all the details on it. But you all in this room will know about it. Okay, there's a teaching in connection with this history here about the sign of Jonah. Okay? And for me, I'm certain that you have to uphold in your prophetic application a primary emphasis. If there's this passage of prophecy and there's an obvious primary emphasis in that passage of prophecy, then as you analyze and apply that passage of prophecy, you can't throw away that primary emphasis and build your model on some of the secondary emphasis. What I mean by that is you can't go in to the New Testament and Sister White's commentary on the sign of Jonah and deny that both the Bible and the Spirit of Prophecy define the sign of Jonah as a message that's given to a wicked and adulterous generation. That you just can't get away from that. That's what it is, all right? There's I'm not saying the secondary truths don't apply, but there's an issue here. In this movement now, there are some that are teaching that where it's just about the parable of the 10 virgins, and all the virgins, the wise and foolish, are the wicked and adulterous generation of vipers. There's another teaching that says, no, the wise virgins in this movement have entered into a covenant with Christ, and they're the chosen generation, a holy people, a royal priesthood, okay? So there's a discussion about whether there's a discussion or not. If you haven't seen that distinction, then you should, because it's there. And all I want to throw in the mix is this, is in the story of the sign of Jonah, in the scriptures, Jesus said that the people of Nineveh would stand up and condemn you for rejecting the message that I brought. Jesus said that to the Jews, because there was one greater than Jonah that was standing here. So in connection with his commentary on the sign of Jonah, Jesus says the people of Nineveh will rise up against you in judgment. And then he said the people of Africa would rise up against you because Sheba came from Ethiopia to Solomon, and there's one greater than Solomon that's here again, and you're rejecting the message of Christ, whereas the Queen of Sheba responded to the message of Solomon. Okay, so the point is, in those two issues, Nineveh is Assyria, the king of the north, and Ethiopia is the king of the south. So we've got a one little ramification of this differences of opinion that are going on in this movement. One of them is over the sign of Jonah, and all I want you to see is that in the sign of Jonah, you can see the king of the north and the king of the south marked there prophetically. So you can also see the king of the north and the king of the south marked here prophetically. All right, and I'm going to suggest, as the African brethren pointed out in the last part of the verses of Daniel 11, that the issue of defining the king of the south in Russia and the king of the north of the United States is also part of the controversy. So at least on two or three things you can see as parting of the ways, and a way to summarize that parting of the ways is, how do you understand the king of the south and the king of the north? Is it internal in the United States? Is it external in the world? Is it both? If it is internal in the United States, are we rightly applying it the way that it is being applied? And I would say this, brothers and sisters, with what's going on here on this election, I'm convinced that this is the type of light that's opened up to Seventh-day Adventists, that they're required to see that the image of the beast is going up. And I'm not backing away from my understanding that the image of the beast test begins with the first Sunday law, marking the midnight cry. But I think we would be foolish to disregard what she says, that the Lord has shown me clearly that the image of the beast will be formed before probation closes, for it is the great test for the people of God by which their eternal destiny will be decided. This is the test they must pass before they are sealed. Okay? You can see here, apostate Protestantism has captured all three branches of the government of the United States, and you and I, as Seventh-day Adventists, are supposed to understand that this is a prophetic fulfillment in advance of the first Sunday law, telling us that the image of the beast test is underway. And the image of the beast test being underway for you and I, if this is true, what does it tell us, among other things? It tells us that now we must finalize the image of Christ in our own personal experience, because at this point in time, two classes are going to be manifested. They either have the image of the beast, or the image of Christ. And if you can't even see that history is started, then you're sleeping at a time you're supposed to be waking up. So I probably lost this, but let's return to this. This is why I'm taking these two presidents, the last Democratic president and the last Republican president, and these two verses, taking them alone, Obama and Trump, and saying Democratic, Republican, King of the South, King of the North, because this is part of the controversy that's going on in this movement, all right?
Can we somehow show that Augustus and Tiberius are Democrat and Republican? Do we have any references to that?
Can we show that Augustus, historically you're talking about, the only way I think you could prove it, but I could be wrong, there may be 100 other ways. The way I would prove it is that you can show they're the last two presidents. And Obama came in the glory of his kingdom. There was never a more communist 8 years in the presidency of the United States than with Obama. There's your King of the South and the glory of his kingdom. See where you get to, where I get to on this is the logic tells me is that the Battle of Raphia, if you on the internal, would have been when Obama was elected the first time. Okay, the King of the South, Russia, communism, just defeated the King of the North in whenever that was, 2008, was that the election? Okay, that would be at one level the Battle of Raphia. And then a few weeks ago would be the Battle of Panium. But see, that's a problem for me because here's midnight. This would say that January 20th this year was Panium. What's that say about our probationary time? We may as well pack our bags and go home, right? Shut down the cameras. And for me, when you're doing internal and external on prophecy, they gotta blend. And so there is, one way or another, I'm hoping you're seeing that I'm not denying the internal in the United States. I see it. But I'm under the conviction, number one, that it's going to have to fit together with the external. But more importantly, my argument is these first 39 verses are the perfection of Daniel 11:40-45. And Daniel 11:40-45 is the external worldview. Therefore, these 39 verses primarily got to be confirming the external worldview. That's where the focus of them are. But back to Daniel 11, so we make sure we get these in place. Verse 23 and 24, although I'm going to write them up as two different verses.
22.
Okay. I wanted verse 22 read with this. I'm sorry. So read verse 22 through 24, whoever does it. Whoever's turn it is.
And with the arms of a flood shall they be overflowed from before him, and shall be broken, yea, also the prince of the covenant. And after the league made with him, he shall work deceitfully, for he shall come up, and shall become strong with a small people.
Okay, so the first, verse 22, this is Trump. What's it mean that with the arms of the flood, he's going to be broken? What's the flood in the scriptures? Sunday law. It's the papacy. It's saying in his presidency, the overflowing scourge hits, and the United States is going to be broken. And also, what's it mean in the time of Christ? Also, the Prince of the Covenant. So this is what allows us to mark Tiberius as Trump, because Trump, the 45th president, is ruling when the Sunday law hits, and the Sunday law has been typified by the cross. Okay, but now verse 23. What's verse 23? The league, right? And long before we were grappling with verse 23 and applying it to the end of the world, we'd already come to understand about midnight, that at midnight, apostate Adventism is going to reach out to the government of the United States in order to persecute the righteous priests, the wise priests. So we already had in place that there was some kind of legal agreement going to be put in place. So by placing this at where, it agrees with previously understood truth. So midnight for the priests, there's going to be a contract, arrangement, a legal connection between apostate Adventism and the government of the United States. We've even got to the detail that we understand that the government of the United States is going to accomplish this activity through their income tax branch of their government because of several witnesses. So we've understood this detail pretty deep before we applied the League of the Jews here. But one thing I want to throw at you is midnight's the dividing line for the priest. Midnight cry is the dividing line for the Levites. Sunday law is the dividing line for... So will there be a league at midnight cry and the Sunday law? Is this typifying an element of the closed door of midnight that will be repeated in the closed door at the midnight cry and the closed door at the Sunday law? Okay, so probably so. So we should see some kind of activity at the midnight cry that has been prefigured by the activity of apostate Adventism in the government of the United States at midnight. What activity would that be? You just agreed to it, some of you anyway. At midnight cry. What church? Do you think he's right? Okay, he thinks he's right. I don't think he's right.
What did he say?
Well, he was kind of vague, so I really can't nail him down. He's probably got wiggle room to squirm a little bit. But
as I understand it, Judas contracts with the ancient Seventh-day Adventists, then the ancient Seventh-day Adventists contract with Rome, and then you get the effect of the dragon,
this here,
third step.
if you guys, I know I've shared this and I get the sense that nobody's really bought into it yet, but I guarantee it's airtight. This here is the Pharisees, and this here is the Sadducees. And the Pharisees and the Sadducees come together at the cross. They don't come together until the cross. Okay, but with what judgment they measure, it's going to be measured unto them. Here, at the midnight cry, if this is the next waymark, it's these Seventh-day Adventists here that have come together to persecute the faithful priests, they're going to come under the same kind of pressure now. And that pressure at the midnight cry, we're saying that you have the first Sunday law. Who is it that's pushing the first Sunday law? Who is it that's taken control of the government of the United States and said, okay, we have to have a Sunday law because of this situation? It's apostate Protestantism. And what are they pushing? A Sunday law. Here, the Sadducees and Pharisees of Adventism, they're still upholding Sabbath. But at the midnight cry, they're going to be confronted now by Protestants that are going to the government of the United States and they're turning it on them, saying these guys need to get in line with the Sunday law. Okay, so, this is the wake-up call for the Levites. The Levites have kept their head buried in the sand here, but now they're actually seeing the Seventh-day Adventist church buckling under to a Sunday law. And it's the wake-up for the faithful Levites that, hey, this is this is the real McCoy. We have to get on board. But I'm saying that the dynamics here, they're certainly going to impact the faithful Adventists here, but it's about the Protestant churches now reaching out to the government to pass the first Sunday law, and this is directed at these Sabbath keepers that have went into darkness back here.
So just to clarify, you're saying the Judas is the false priest in present truth.
Okay. He's the Pharisee that has light and power.
Which would also, so with SDA, you've got SDA there. Isn't there Pharisees in SDA being the conservative members of the SDA, and then the church conference?
Probably, but here's the point that it hasn't clicked. And you guys need to straighten me out if I'm applying this wrong, but I'm certain that I'm not. At 9/11, we all agree the second angel arrives. And at one level, the second angel is Elisha. So 9/11, Elisha is anointed. But when Elijah anointed Elisha, he anointed 3 persons: Hazael, Jehu, and Elisha. So at 9/11, you have 3 players. Jehu is the classic example of a Pharisee. All right? And Hazael, Sister White says, speaks with the voice of the false prophet. Okay, so the voice of the false prophet is defined back in the beginning of Millerite history when apostate Protestantism began to fulfill their role as the daughters of Babylon. And what they had done, they had rejected truth. And if you go back and look at the commentary of the Millerites about the Protestant churches at that time, and Sister White's commentary, when a church rejects truth, and if they're going to continue to profess to be a church, then what they have to do is they have to manufacture a false presence of the Holy Spirit. And that's manufactured through a false emphasis upon love, joy, and faith. It's the characteristics that Sister White in one place calls and quote me on this, a goody religion, doubled. Okay? So there is a group of people that are operating on, and I'm saying it's the Seventh-day Adventist Church because the Seventh-day Adventist Church has rejected light back in their 2nd and 3rd generation. Okay, they're going to be held accountable for that rejection. They're going to come together here, and there's some Pharisees in there, but their characteristics is an experience that's based upon this goody-goody religion that has rejected truth, and it's an emphasis upon the emotional side of our character, a false love, joy, and peace. They come together here. These are the experts of prophetic light. Judas, been there right from the start, seen it all happen. They come together against the wise priests who have all 5 of those elements because they're complete. You look disturbed.
So you said that they're the prophetic experts, and in Christ's time, and I don't doubt that from the perspective of the point you're making. In Christ's time, the Pharisees were the prophetic experts.
Were they?
And they rejected Daniel 9, and they wouldn't apply
this in Christ's time. This is the Jews at large.
Yeah.
This is okay, but who's Judas?
Judas.
Why did Judas? What was Judas's false logic for turning Christ in?
He wanted a literal kingdom.
That and what else? He knew that put in the right situation, Christ would go ahead and proclaim his kingdom because he knew Christ was going to set up a kingdom. He knew the prophecies. He knew. Okay, so Judas is someone that knows. But in any case, all I'm saying is next step. Adventism is confronted now with the problem, and it's coming from the false prophet there is probably apostate Protestantism. You'd have to have a false prophet. The government would be the dragon, and there would have to be a third entity there. But it's going to confront the Adventist church. They're going to have to bow down to Sunday.
So at another level, when they tried Christ, you had Pharisees and Sadducees. You had Caiaphas, who was a Sadducee. You had essentially the Sanhedrin, which was there were more, as I understand,
More Sadducees.
more Sadducees, but the Pharisees had the prophetic understanding, and they couldn't be ignored because so many of the people followed them.
Yeah, in Adventism today, we have what we call conservative and liberals. So in the Adventist church, if you're just dealing with them, you got your Pharisees and your Sadducees.
So, I think I understand better what you're saying.
But this is Judas. He's one of the 12.
Yeah.
And so when you get to the next step, with the judgment that they passed against the faithful priests, they're going to be judged. And the judgment is going to consist of the first Sunday law. That's going to be instituted by apostate Protestantism, using the government of the United States. And the false prophet there is probably those Seventh-day Adventist leadership that joined with them, such as a classic quote, and I can't do it word for word, but you all know it, where she says, in large gatherings, pastors will lead out pushing Sunday law, and it's Adventist pastors at large gatherings. So that would be at the midnight cry.
It's also a dream with the prescribing of a house.
Yeah, maybe. I'm just trying to show the three entities. So when you get to the Sunday law, what are the three entities? Who's this? Here, this is the civil power. Okay? This is the civil power. This is the apostate, this is the false prophet, the dragon, and this is the beast, the corrupt church. Okay, in the time of Christ, it'd be the Sanhedrin. The civil power would be pagan Rome. The false prophet would be Judas. So when you get to the Sunday law, you're going to have to see these three entities again. So who's the false prophet at the Sunday law? Now it's the government of the United States. Who's the dragon? United Nations. Who's the beast? Rome. Okay, so there's the perfect fulfillment, and you got to see these three entities in each of these closed doors. So that's why I'm saying there's a distinction between midnight cry, and the Sunday law. It's the same dynamics, but it's the Protestants that are pushing the Sunday legislation at the midnight cry that's going to put Sabbath keepers in jeopardy. Not just priests and Levites, Sabbath keepers. They're going to face the same judgment that they put on the wise priests.
So could you put those three up there just to make it clear?
What three? But here's the thing. Here's the thing. I intend to go through these kind of thoughts in detail, but I wouldn't have put the first 39 verses on the board, and I do as I often do. I let myself get sidetracked. So here's the league, which we're understanding is midnight. The Adventist Church in Judah is going to reach out to the government of the United States. Why are they going to do it? Because Syria is somehow threatening them. Remember back in the history. Okay, so anyway, what's verse 24? What did we read in verse 24? Peacefully, you got to note peacefully because this connects with Donald Trump. But I'm going to keep it simple here. Time. Okay, this is now putting the history of the midnight cry to the Sunday law in place, beginning with the Battle of Actium. Okay, so I think I'll even put Actium there. So we need what? Verse 20. 25 and 26.
And he shall stir up his power and his courage against the king of the south with a great army. And the king of the south shall be stirred up to battle with a very great and mighty army. But he shall not stand, for they shall forecast devices against him. Yea, they that feed of the portion of his meat shall destroy him, and his army shall overflow, and many shall fall down slain.
So, what is that? Okay, it's not, you're almost there, but it's not really Actium, is it? It's preparation for Actium, isn't it? Yeah. This is repeating and enlarging. It's put the time that they're going to rule after the Battle of Actium, but now it's going to repeat and enlarge. And it's talking about the preparation for the Battle of Actium. So that would be pre-Actium, not post-Actium, right? Does everyone understand that? So this is not that we have to have a better way to summarize this, but at this point, because of time, I'm going to put pre-Actium. It repeats and enlarges. So verses, and why is this important? Where is Actium in a waymark? Paneum, midnight cry. So this is telling us history that's before the midnight cry, but after midnight. Pre-Actium after, post midnight, and pre-Actium / midnight cry. All right, verse 27. Both these cases. Whoever's going to read 27 through 29.
And both these kings' hearts shall be to do mischief, and they shall speak lies at one table, but it shall not prosper, for yet the end shall be at the time appointed. Then shall he return into his land with great riches, and his heart shall be against the holy covenant, and he shall do exploits and return to his own land. At the time appointed he shall return and come toward the south, but it shall not be as the former or as the latter.
Okay, I made a change there when I heard my brother reading that. I'm going to put 27 in here. Okay, it's pre-Actium, post-midnight, and it's talking about a peace treaty that goes on in this time period. And it has a distinct mark, and it speaks of the time appointed. So it allows us to take this as a line and then go into verses 28 and 29 and treat them as another line. You follow my logic there? So, go ahead. Well, it may not say peace treaty on face value, but it's saying that in between the Battle of Raphia and Paneum, which is also the Battle of Actium, in that history, they're going to sit down at a table and speak lies to one another. And with the other lines, particularly the two peace treaties after the Battle of Raphia, generally a peace treaty is carried out by nations around a table. This would probably be that Security Council table in the United Nations, I would guess. So that's what I'm saying, is it's not directly saying peace treaty, but that's what's being described here. A truce is truce peace.
Yeah, but it's a temporal thing. It's
Yep.
not really a signed document or whatever.
It might even be a signed document. Because one of the stories in this history is speaking, laws that get passed. But because the United States is going to speak as a dragon in verse 11 of Revelation 13, but it's going to tell the world to set up an image of the beast, and it will have the power to make that image live and speak. It's about speaking. So these waymarks, you should be looking for legal enactments all the way through, I believe. 28 and 29 is summarized as time appointed there, but I like the way Uriah Smith puts it, two returnings, because the way he approaches it, you get to see two battles in that history that both have a relevance to our history. What's the first battle? Actium. And after the Battle of Actium, the king of the north returns to the city of Rome, a conqueror, and celebrates. And what's the next battle? 66 to 70 AD, the destruction of Jerusalem. So we're saying that this here is the midnight cry, and we understand this to be the Sunday law. So these two returnings are emphasizing, could be understood to be emphasizing those two waymarks. Yes? Question, comments? All right. Verse 30 and 31.
For the ships of Chittim shall come against him, therefore he shall be grieved and return, and have indignation against the holy covenant. So shall he do, he shall even return and have intelligence with them that forsake the holy covenant. An arm shall stand on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength, and shall take away the daily sacrifice, and they shall place the abomination that maketh desolate.
What's verse 30? Who's the ships of Chittim? Kittim. Okay, it's the Vandal, it's the second trumpet. Genseric launched his naval attacks from Cyprus, which is Kittim. But in terms of end-time Bible prophecy, where do we put the second trumpet? 9/11. So we've already associated Kittim with Islam, but this isn't 9/11. What else is going on here? What's it mean that he's having indignation against the Holy Covenant here? This is Islam, and it's Balaam's third strike, right? Yes? Okay, Balaam's, I'm just going to put Sunday law.
Have intelligence with them that forsake the Holy Covenant. Didn't we also used to mark that as Volkswagen?
As what?
Didn't we used to mark that also as Volkswagen as he comes in this unity with the papacy to bring down the Sunni opinion?
Yes, yes. Ronald Reagan. I wasn't hearing you say Reagan clearly. It was throwing me. Yeah, the secret alliance that was formed between the United States and the papacy prior to 1989. The United States is having intelligence with them that forsake the Holy Covenant.
So could you mark 1989 as verse 30?
No, but it fits. It's how some say it's a fragment, okay, of it. But this has got to be Sunday law. It's at the time appointed. And where was Islam striking prior to 1989? You're going to say in Afghanistan, but this is about the transition from the sixth kingdom to the seventh and eighth kingdom. I'm understanding.
I think we can confirm that this is Sunday law because in the literal Rome restricted the reading of the Bible, saying that only the church fathers could, safely read it. So they were pressing their views on everybody else.
Yeah, and the African brethren that put together the material from verse 23 onward, what do they say this history represents? They're saying it's 533. That the decree of Justinian that's making the Pope of Rome the corrector of heretics and the head of the churches is this agreement in 533 that is the intelligence with them that forsook the Holy Covenant. And there is an intelligence, or there is an interaction at the Sunday law. You got the sixth kingdom taken off the scene, the seventh kingdom is set up, and the leader of the seventh kingdom is the United States, and they're going to, according to Revelation 17, agree. And you have every reason to believe that agree means it's some kind of legal enactment. They're going to agree to give their kingdom unto the beast for 1 hour. That's all going on at the Sunday law. And this agreement would qualify for the 533 decree of Justinian. And the important point here, probably from pioneer understanding, is that the subject changes. By that I mean that up to verse 30, the subject has been pagan Rome that has intelligence with them that forsake the Holy Covenant. But then when you get into verse 30, it's no longer, the pagan Rome is no longer the subject, now it's papal Rome. Because in verse 30, arms are going to stand on his part. Who are the arms that stand on the part of the papacy at the Sunday law? France, okay. And France was what in relationship to the 10 nations? It was the firstborn of the Catholic Church. It's a 10th part in Revelation 11. So it's the United States. It's Ahab. It's the ships of Tarshish that are going to stand up. It's the United Nations with Clovis, the United States leading, stand up, and they're going to do 3 things. What are they going to do? They're going to pollute the sanctuary of strength. The sanctuary of strength for the United States is the Constitution, fully gone at the Sunday law. They're going to take away the daily, and that take away means remove. And what's the daily that gets taken away? Paganism in past history, what's it typifying now? It's got to typify a religion that was restraining the rise of Catholicism. What religion was restraining the rise of Catholicism that's taken away at the Sunday law? Protestantism. This is the end of Protestant America. You know, it's already gone. It's progressive fall, but there. And what did they do at the same point in time? It's a repudiation of the Constitution. It's a rejection of Protestantism forever. And it's placing the abomination that maketh desolate. Where does it place it? As the head. Sister White says, under one head. It becomes the head of the threefold union right there. The abomination of desolation being the papacy. That's verse 30 and 31. Someone read verses 32 through 36. I hope we get through this.
And such as do wickedly against the covenant shall be corrupt by flatteries. But the people that do know their God shall be strong and do exploits. And they that understand among the people that shall instruct many, yet they shall fall by the sword, and by flame, by captivity, and by spoil, many days. Now when they shall fall, they shall be holpen with a little help, but many shall cleave to them with flatteries. And some of them of understanding shall fall, to try them, and to purge, and to make them white, even to the time of the end, because it is yet for a time appointed. And the king shall do according to his will, and he shall exalt himself, and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods, and shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished, for that is determined shall be done.
Okay, so tomorrow, Lord willing, where we'll start is on looking at this indignation that you can find in Daniel 9, 26 and 27, and the prospering that you can find in Daniel 8, verse 20 to 23. But what it's saying is that this is the end. These verses are Daniel 11, 44 and 45. This is the tidings out of the east and the north that trouble the papacy, and he goes forth to utterly destroy and make away many, yet he comes to his end. Okay, and his coming to his end is he prospers until the indignation, and the indignation there is Michael standing up, the close of human probation. And you really have to make sure that you understand that, if it's true or false, because if it's true, that what it's saying is that Rome, in verse 14, is introduced into these sequence of verses, and it says, the robbers of thy people shall exalt themselves to establish the vision, yet they shall fall. So one of the characteristics of Rome, and Rome is typifying modern Rome at the end of the world, is their exaltation, and we would put verse 14 between Raphia and Panium. This is where the story of the papacy comes into Daniel 11. But here he's still exalting himself in verse 36, where he comes to his end with none to help. So the beginning of his story, he's exalting himself. The end of his story, he's exalting himself. Okay? But in verse 36, he prospers until the indignation be accomplished. For that is determined, it's going to be done. So it's marking the end of that line. There's a line of Rome from verse 14 to 36. It begins with his exalting, it ends with his exalting. And I'm making that emphasis because of verse 37 to 39. Will someone read that?
Neither shall he regard the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor regard for he shall magnify himself above all. But in his estate shall he honor the God of forces, and a God whom his fathers knew not shall he honor with gold and silver and with precious stones and pleasant things. Thus shall he do in the most strongholds with a strange God whom he shall acknowledge and increase with glory, and he shall cause them to rule over many, and shall divide the land for a gain.
In verse 37, where he's magnifying himself, I'm arguing that he's exalting himself based upon the other verses in there. When he's magnifying himself, he's exalting himself. But in verse 36, he's already come to his end with none to help. He's prospered till the indignation. Verse 37, he's exalting himself again. He's magnifying himself. So you're forced as a student of prophecy to mark where he's exalting himself, and I'm saying this is verse 14. The first place he exalts himself. It's verse 14 and onward. What he's going to do is he's going to honor a God of fortresses. Forces there is fortresses. He's going to come into relationship in verse 14 in between the battle of Raphia and Peniah with a military power that he's going to surrender, agree that this military power should take control of not only the military conquests that are ahead, but also the financial structure. He's going to honor him with gold and silver and precious stones and whatever. There's one other thing there. So we need to test and see if the basic application that we made on this whole history of verses 1 through 39 is sound. And then there's little things in those verses that we don't have any clear light on yet, or I don't, that we need to put in place. And then the 5 things that the 5 students looked at, we need to see what contribution that will make to this story. And then move forward to look at the other message that's being lifted up in this movement in opposition to these ideas. Any comments? Sister Tamini, you want to pray?
Heaven, thank you for this morning and the study we could have here. Thank you that we can still gather in freedom and study your word. Please help us to understand these truths and help us that they may change our heart and being. Please be also with us the rest of the day and work we want to get accomplished. Thank you for that. In Jesus' name, amen.